Hello, my name is Adrene Wike, and thank you for joining me for our Me to We Resiliency Storytelling. I'm excited to hear about and be able to share these next two stories. So, Raj, I'm going to pass it up to you first.
Sure. So my name is Raj Shiva, and the reason I'm here is because I feel that we need to share more of our stories in these amazing organizations like LEAD and with programs like Me Too We Too, giving us this chance to reach out to our fellow leaders. So mine is a story of stepping off the workplace multiple times from roles which were seen as highly adrenaline driven and front office and trading, sales, things like that. People said, "Oh, you'll never get back." And constantly reinventing myself. Guess what? I did get back, albeit in different avatars. So I want to add that I'm also going to be graduating from LEAD in June this year, along with my son, who will be graduating from Stanford undergrad as well. How did that come about? So I was in, let's turn the clock back a bit. So I was an FX trader for many years, for 10 years. I've lived and worked all over the world globally. It's a very competitive, very focused area. Typically, in my time, there were no women on the floors, let alone minority or otherwise. Also, it was seen that you had to have a certain linear path, right? So you couldn't prioritize family, you couldn't do anything else. You just had to do that. So turned out I had to take 6 years off as we moved multiple countries. So I lived and worked in other parts of the world as well, but I did have that break at that point in time. Then, when we moved to the US, I ended up joining another firm in not exactly, that was the first reinvention. So I had to find, if you take a concentric circle, I had to go one around it. So not the same thing I was doing, but something around it. I became a derivative salesperson for foreign exchange products, but other products as well. So, I was widening my circle of influence, but also learning something new and starting again at a point where I didn't know too much about it. So in New York City. So I did that for about 5 years. And then guess what? Life had other plans for me again. I took time off again for personal reasons. And we had some issues, so, personal reasons. And turned out that 5 years I had worked. And then I pretty much didn't work again for another almost 5 years for family reasons. And then again, life had other things for me. And, people assume, so what did you do when you had your time off? So I want to tell this to women, especially, and men too, who might be, in today's world. I do have someone who works for me who took time off to take care of his baby, that skills are transferable. So don't ever underestimate your skill set, because just because a career is non-linear doesn't mean that you can't keep morphing and reinventing, being relevant, staying completely on track, building purpose. Because one of the things that you need to remember is, if you did a demanding role earlier, you do have the hard skills, but you also have soft skills. And those are the ones that you really can parlay into something broader and bigger. Maybe, and this is to a lot of women who might spend their time doing carpools and things like that. I didn't do that. I was in the city, so I took the subways, did all of the other stuff. But the point is, I set up a nonprofit called ACE, Academic and Creative Engagement, and that was really to tutor. It was for a tennis program in Harlem called the Harlem Junior Tennis and Education Program. And this was really where my kids played tennis, and I was there. And so I decided that I was going to create an academic and creative engagement program to tutor kids in math who played tennis, minority kids who were very good. They would have gotten college sports scholarships, but wouldn't have made the cut on SAT. So it was really for that. And so the point is, when you build a business, albeit in a nonprofit world, and you go get your grants, you run it, in a certain way, you do learn some skills as well. So the point is to parlay that in your next interviews. And my next interview turned out to be at a bulge bracket firm You can look me up on LinkedIn if you want to know which one, because I don't really want to name it. But the point is that it's something that people said, oh, it's never going to happen. You're never going to go back into regular finance and banking and all of that. And guess what? It did happen. I joined through something called reentry, but it was really a program meant for people who might have taken times off after having been mid to senior levels in their career. Seemed like great, but it was tough. I went back and actually went back to doing the same thing I was earlier. And at some point, and this is the third concentric circle, I moved into a role which was on the regulatory and compliance side of the products that I had been dealing. So the point I'm trying to make here is your circle of engagement might widen, might meander a bit, might be even a Venn diagram at some point, but there's going to be those intersections. And the point is to find those common transferable skills and really try to connect the dots. And I will, I don't know how much time I have, but I'm going to end with a couple of things, which is rethink purpose in life, because things are changing really fast. We're living in this VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, all of that. But it's really about what following a role model alone may not work for each one of you. And this is the point I want to keep telling people. Don't blindly think, oh, somebody else did this and they had a career without a gap, and so that's the only way. That's not true. Unlike earlier, what works for you may not work for me. Second thing I want to say is we need to find ways to make life more purpose driven for each one of us. And that doesn't mean you have to find a less interesting job, or it has to be only a nonprofit. Not true at all. You have to define your purpose. That's the second point. The third one is the skills. Work and life itself are all challenging, and so the things you need today is going to be very different from what worked earlier. And even people who worked continuously without a break don't have those skills. You are here at LEAD for a reason, because you identified that, the last word, in the abbreviation LEAD is disrupt. So it's really about, you have to disrupt yourself and maybe your thinking to find what's next for you. And in that journey, you will find that a lot of the skills you had earlier, they're transferable, but you do need to pick up a new set of skills. And that's probably why we're all here learning from each other and hopefully, finding that in that process of the journey, the more things change, the more a lot of them remain the same. And with that, thank you, everyone.
Yes, I love that. As I said earlier to you guys, kind of before we started this recording, I work with military spouses. So we deal with a lot of career pivots and gaps in our employment and trying to find ourselves and what that looks like. Well, dealing with the military lifestyle and everything that happens in between. So yes, you're so right. And we call them career pivots. You hit a wall and you turn and you face another direction. And I always encourage the military spouses, go look at my LinkedIn. It's all over the place, the education that I've had and the experiences. And, I've had just as many hardships in between all of that, whether it's personal family things that have happened, everything in between you can imagine. So you're so right. Thank you so much. And I want to turn to our next presenter and allow her some time too. So Xin-Jing, please, it is all yours now.
Thank you, Adrene. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share my story about the resilience. Actually, before I decided to reach out to Adrene, saying that, okay, please count me in, I thought it over for a long time. If that is a good story, I really want to share, because that is a very personal, not about me, but about my son. So, but I consider it, I thought it over, and then I think that maybe this is a good one to share, because this is a one story about faith. So my story is this. So about 8 years ago, my son actually was seriously ill. Um, he he was some virus actually infected his brain and the spinal cord. And even till today, he still has some disability. We are still in the journey, on the journey. That was a very difficult time because that was just about half years after we relocated to California, to the United States. So everything actually was very new to us. We didn't know a lot about especially the medical system. So he was at first had a fever, and we actually went to 4 clinics, visited until the 6th doctor before he was really diagnosed as this encephalitis. So that was a hard time. He was accepted as a pneumonia by inpatient care. And it was a long journey. Did a lot of tests, and until he was thought that maybe some very bad thing was happening, and then he was moved to ICU. Just the next day after he was accepted as a pneumonia inpatient patient. So, and he lost all the conscience for about 2 days, and then he actually kind of had conscious, become conscious. But in that 2 days, that was a moment that I kind of had a belief and a faith, because I reached out to a Wike connection, a friend of Wike connection, actually back in China. I kind of had the trust in her because she is somebody that had 20 years of experience in something. And then she told me that by which date, if my son could recover, could awake, then everything should be fine. So I had that faith, though my husband actually lost his faith. He crashed at that moment. And after my son actually recovered, he had this slight eyes movement. He was able to nod or shake his head. And at that moment, the doctors, the neurologist, and also and the infection test, actually they had a debate because the neurologist was worried that my son could not work anymore, work again. But the infection doctor, actually, she didn't know what is the balance, because they had used up all their treatment for my son's case. So they had this debate, and then they decided to use just 1/3 of the dose on my son, the steroid. And at that moment, I was okay. I thought that as long as he's alive, I'm okay with whether he could walk or not, his future. But then I accepted the treatment. But after that, the true, the true crash happened on me, because my son was unconscious again, and for 3 days. And at that moment, more than 3 days actually, at that moment, that was the uncertain future that nobody knows if he could survive. That was the time that I actually could not hold myself. I really crashed. But I would say that there was always more support than difficulties in the world. I remember that at one night, I didn't know what to do. And then the nurse working at the ICU, she grabbed me, she stopped me. She said that, "Mom, I noticed that you're not well right now, but you need to remember you're the mom. any feelings you have, your son can feel it. She said that, trust me, kids are strong. Actually, she said that, trust me, I had worked at the ICU for more than 10 years. Kids are strong. That was the word that actually shed light into my darkness. And that gave me the strong faith that I should actually believe in the future instead of being conquered by any disasters. So I prayed. I just had this faith in myself. I just believed that my son will survive. And the magic happened. So after 3 days, he did awake. But this moment, he lost all his actually movement. We even could not notice any of his eye movement at the moment. He was like noodles. But right now, he is able to walk. He's even able to run. Even though he still has this disability, we're still in the journey to help him to recover. Even though that neurologist told us that the neurons are just they could not recover, but we're still seeing the improvements on him. So 2 years ago, he had this ankle surgery to put some news into his ankle to help him stand straighter. But now, just a week ago, he had those news moved out, which I thought is a good sign that for him to improve. So, based on this story, what I want to share here is that first, never lose your faith. Just have your faith. Today, I even made this YouTube video saying that what you think actually is your future. So just keep believing in yourself and believe in your future. The second thing I want to say is that there are always more support than difficulties in the world. So thanks the life and believe in your life. That's my story. Thank you.
Wow, how incredible. And I love how you shared your journey through that. You know, there was some dark times because sometimes we need to kind of hit that bottom before, we can get back up because we're trying to carry so much, right? Sometimes too much. So what a beautiful thing that nurse did for you, though, was
Yes.
have that conversation, which seemed to be exactly what you needed. So thank you for sharing. I think it's important to realize how much we all carry and go through, and how sometimes just saying something simple to somebody can be a life changer or can restore that faith that they needed. And it sounded like that's exactly what you had in that ICU nurse. So I love that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. We are lucky.
Thank you. Yeah, so lucky. Oh my gosh. But thank you both for your stories and what you guys are bringing, these lessons, that everybody sometimes just needs to hear that again. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Adrene.
Oh, I got you muted. There we go.